what is radical responsibility? Radical responsibility means you have the radical ability to respond to anything that happens in your life. You have the radical ability to respond in a different way to your life. And this is in opposition to reactivity, where you are just reacting to whatever is happening in your life and all the circumstances and all the people in your life. And you have absolutely no choice and no sovereignty on how you're going to react. But responsibility is the ability to choose your responses. Hello. So today all of you are in for an amazing treat because we are going to be discussing something called radical responsibility. Now this concept of radical responsibility is in every single mindset book, be it a mindset book on relationships, be it a mindset book on money, business, stocks, pretty much everything. Every self-help book, every spirituality book, every mythological book talks at the basis of it as radical responsibility. So we will go into how each aspect of your life can completely change when you take on this concept of radical responsibility, be it your manifestations, affirmations, pretty much everything, including all your relationships in life. So what is this radical responsibility? It basically means you take radical responsibility for everything that happens in your life. And for every relationship you have in your life, you are 100% responsible for the relationship. So it's not a 50-50 thing that, okay, I'm going to take 50% responsibility for how things go and you take 50% responsibility for how things go. No. Radical responsibility means you take 100% responsibility for every thought, feeling, action, response, reaction that you make for any circumstance in your life. Let me give you a few circumstances. Say your child is born with a congenital disease or is diagnosed with autism or is diagnosed with Down syndrome. Say you come to know that your husband is having an affair or is planning to leave you. Say you yourself are diagnosed with some kind of cancer or some kind of ailment. Now, all these scenarios, you are like, but how can I take responsibility for something which is not even my fault? And that is the first point about radical responsibility. And that is the difference between what is fault and what is responsibility. So take the example of someone bangs into your car and you come and see your car is completely, scratched and everything. Is it your fault? No, it is not your fault. But is it your responsibility? Yes, it is completely your responsibility. From the time the circumstance was the scratched car, the thoughts that you have about this scratched car, oh my God, I have to spend so much money. It wasn't even my fault. Tomorrow I have to go here. Someone has to, do something about it. Someone else. So when you start having those thoughts, and that leads to a feeling of anger, desperation, rage. So all those feelings are feelings which you think because of the thoughts that you have had. So you can change your thought, feeling, and the action which you take. Do you hit that guy? Do you call the police? Do you then make a big scene on social media? But finally, you have to take responsibility for doing something. So each one, not everyone will react the same way because everyone's thoughts are different about it, and actions are different for any circumstance in life. So how do you take radical responsibility for something that is not your fault? And that's a beautiful place to start. When you start to find fault, say something happens in your relationship and you start to take that, okay, this is my fault. When you think of it as your own fault, you go into a downward spiral of guilt, shame, and this leads to helplessness and feeling like I can't do anything about it. And, a downward spiral which is not serving anyone. So you don't want to, even if it's your fault, you don't want to go into that, it is my fault. You want to say it is my responsibility. The difference between saying it is my responsibility is you don't go into that, oh my God, I'm so horrible. This happened because I didn't study for my exam, or this happened because I didn't give him some time. I didn't give my husband time, or I didn't do this, or I didn't look after myself, or I should have gone for that blood check before. Then I could have diagnosed my own ailment. No. Responsibility starts in the present. Responsibility starts not in the past. Guilt, shame, all of that fault finding is something that you did in the past. Responsibility starts in the present. What can I do now? What am I going to do now? Now that I'm in this situation, I am going to take 100% responsibility for my action, thoughts, feelings, everything. Be it for an exam. If you're in that, I am at fault, I didn't study, you're not going to be concentrating on the question that is in front of you. But when you take responsibility, that is when you can think of things that you can do. It is action oriented, it is forward oriented, it is a positive spiral up, and the emotions that are that lead radical responsibility are feelings of courage, strength, power, sovereignty. And so this is what you want to go ahead with, not with guilt and shame. So when you find, so that was thinking that it is your fault. Say you think it is someone else's fault, then you are giving away all of your power to that circumstance. It is the world's fault, God's fault, environment's fault, government's fault, someone else's fault, that other woman's fault, the question setter's fault, that this kind of question came to me, or this kind of circumstance, or this kind of thing happened in my life, or that other driver's fault. You are giving away all of your power to the other person, to the front thing. And so that is also playing victimhood. And again, it is not a power-based, action-oriented, in the present moment thing to do. So you kind of understood that radical responsibility is different from fault. It can be anyone's fault. It can be your fault also. But in that moment, you want to say, I am radically responsible for what I do with this circumstance. If your child has Down syndrome, you can either keep finding fault in yourself, oh, I should have done this or that, or you can find fault in someone else. It could be the doctor, it could be your husband, it could be pretty much circumstances. Or you can take radical responsibility for what am I going to do now, and how am I going to process this information. That leads me to the second point, that is, how do you know, are you in fault finding? Is it my fault? Is it so-and-so's fault? Or are you taking radical responsibility? Is the kind of thoughts that you're having around it. Are you having why thoughts? Like, why did my husband have an affair? Or why did this happen to me? Or why is this happening to me? Or are you asking questions which are around how? How am I going to deal with this situation? How am I going to cope with this situation? How? Because once you start asking how questions from yourself, that is that you're taking responsibility for the situation that you are in, and you're not going into that victimhood mentality. So that's the second point. Now, you might be thinking, oh my God, this is super difficult, taking radical responsibility for everything that happens to you in your life. But so why is it life-changing? So I'm going to give you 3 points of why radical responsibility is the most life-changing thing that can happen to you. The first thing is it builds huge amount of confidence and trust in yourself. What is the difference between confidence and trust? When do you trust yourself? Say you say that I am going to go to the gym every day at 8 o'clock. You have put it in your book, and then you take radical responsibility for that action. Every day at 8, you show up at the gym because you've taken radical responsibility for yourself, for your actions. And over time, when you start to find yourself giving yourself that trust that whenever you say, okay, I'm not going to be having junk food today, and you actually don't have junk food because you've taken radical responsibility for your life and you can't blame anyone else, and you're not fault finding. You don't eat the chips and then go into a guilt trip and victimhood. Oh my God, why did I do this? I'm such a horrible person. That is fault finding. It's not, it could be your fault, but you take radical responsibility. You eat the chips, next thing you say, I am responsible. I did this. How am I going to correct this? I'm not going to keep chips in the house. I'm not going to, I'm going to put these things into place, and I'm going to do this to, stay in my responsible zone. So once you start being super responsible about your life, you start to see that you start to trust yourself more. After a while, it's not even negotiable. The minute you say, I'm going to write one page every day, you are not negotiating with yourself. You know you're going to be 100% responsible for your actions, and you just show up. And soon, this trust in yourself leads to this huge confidence in yourself. How does that happen? When you go into a meeting, you tell yourself that I'm 100% radically responsible for whatever I say. And no matter how horrible the front person is or how much they are instigating me, I am going to be radically responsible for my emotions and my reactions. And that is going to give you a huge amount of confidence no matter where you're going in life, because you know that you are in power and you trust yourself. So that's the first thing that is going to lead to a huge amount of trust in yourself and confidence in yourself. The second thing is sovereignty of your life. Now, what does sovereignty of your life mean? That is exactly what I was telling you now. When you go into an interaction with two people, when you go into a circumstance, when you go into an exam, or when you go into a situation where you feel that the front person has more power over you. But when you live in a life of radical responsibility for yourself, you find that you are the sovereign, you are the queen, you are the king of everything that happens in your life. So, having full sovereignty of your life. So, when you get up in the morning, you say that I am going to have a happy, calm day. Once you say that I'm going to take responsibility for a day which is happy and calm, no matter what happens, you have a flat tire, you just say, I am going to be happy and calm, and what kind of thoughts can I have about this situation which can still keep me in a happy and calm state? If your son breaks something in the house or comes back, with a bad exam paper, you tell yourself that I am going to be radically responsible for all the thoughts and actions, and I'm still going to be a sovereign of my emotions, still going to be in a happy and calm state, and I'm not going to let this ruffle me. So that puts you as the sovereign of your day and sovereign of your life. The next question is, and the last answer is, and this is going to be a game changer, is fate and free will. Do you believe in fate, destiny, that we are all destiny's children? I think you cannot negate this thing that there is karma at play, there is destiny at play, the world is at play, something which is outside of us. And it's a scary thing, and it can be a beautiful thing, no matter, depends on how you see it. So some people believe that we are just reacting to a life which is happening to us. So we are just not in control of the driver's seat. We are in a car, and the car is going wherever it wants to take us, and we are just reacting to it. That is people who believe that it is all fate. There are people who believe that it's part fate and part free will. That whenever there is whenever something happens in our life, part of it is fate and part of it is free will. But when you start to believe and live a life of radical responsibility, everything becomes free will. No matter what happens in your life, no matter what happens in your life, no matter what cards fate deals you, it is always your choice. And that is exactly what every single spiritual book out there is telling you. It is always your choice. There is always, first of all, there is always a choice. Did someone bang your car? Did you get a diagnosis of cancer? Did your husband leave you? No matter what happens in your life, no matter what fate deals you, you always have choices. And those choices are multiple. That is why people believe in the multiverse, because there is choice every single second that you are breathing. There is a choice that you're making. So, radical responsibility shows you all these choices that you have between that circumstance, between whatever happened in your life, and between what reaction you are going to give it. There are thousands of choices, and you get to choose which choice you make, and that is your radical responsibility. And even if you make a bad choice, it is still your responsibility, and you can always choose different in the next moment, and you can always choose different the moment after that. And that is how you change your life of being a reactive circle of just circumstances which make you react in a particular way, and making you the sovereign of your life. So every single mindset book will say, if your marriage is not working, you take 100% responsibility for it, and 100% say, how am I going to change this? How am I going to change myself? How am I going to change my thoughts, actions, feelings, everything? So, radical responsibility makes you the sovereign of your life, takes back all the power from everyone else that you're giving your power away to. That my day is going to be bad because XYZ was bad to me, or my day is going to be good because XYZ said something good to me. You take it all back towards yourself, and everything that happens in your life is about free will. Now, how amazing would that be if you had that superpower of changing every fate into free will, and being the queen or king of your life, the sovereign of your life? And that is what radical responsibility can give you. So, how are you going to lead a life of radical responsibility? A few points. The first, I already told you, no matter what happens in your life, take a moment to step back, feel your feelings, and then ask questions. That don't ask questions like why did it happen to me, and rather ask the question how can I make this a good thing? How is this thing happening for me and not to me? You must have read it in so many mindset books, so many books, that it says that don't ask the question, why did it happen to me? Everything in the world is happening for me. And another question you can ask yourself is, how did whatever happened, the circumstance, actually seem like I actually chose that circumstance for me? How would it feel as if I chose it? I chose to have this, my child to be a special child. I chose this child. I chose these circumstances. And the minute you start to think that this was something that I really wanted, in fact, this is exactly what I wanted, this is the exact child that I wanted, this is the exact circumstances that I wanted, then you start to live a life of asking yourself that question, that I'm going to take radical responsibility for it. And yes, it is going to be a very interesting kind of life, a totally different life once you start to take radical responsibility. Now, my question to you would be, which are the books where you have come across this concept, maybe not in this exact words of radical responsibility? Radical responsibility is a word which I have read in Mark Manson's book. I have heard in Tony Robbins' conferences. I have read in Mel Robbins' book. I have seen it in The Law of Attraction, where she says that even negative thoughts are pulling in, negative things into your life, and positive thoughts are pulling in positive things into your life. That is an example of radical responsibility. No matter what happens in your life, you have free will. You are doing it in your life. You are the narrator of your life. So where are these points? Where are these lines which, you are the creator of your life? That is an example of radical responsibility. So where are you seeing these lines? In every single book on mindset, mythology, spirituality, self-help, and all of them are telling you to be a sovereign and take responsibility for your thoughts, actions, feelings, and reactions to what happens in your life. I hope you enjoyed this video and keep watching for more.